Kids, I had a terrific guest lined up for this week's episode, and we recorded a conversation together, and all was well, until I started listening to the playback to do the editing, and the sound just went south, man, so I could not use it. Which leaves me in this awkward position of not having an episode and actually sitting down to record on release day. But when you find yourself in a position like this, you've got a couple of choices. You can put your feet up, take the week off, say that's A-okay. Or you can do the scramble. And if you're listening to this right now, guess I scrambled something up for you. And we'll get to it on the other side. Hello, you're listening to the John Huff Podcast. Oh, yay. It happens, man. Podcasting is not an exact science, at least not for me. Sometimes stuff goes weird with the tech. Sometimes stuff goes weird with the room you're in. Sometimes stuff just goes weird, man. And what you gotta do, I think, in situations like that where you produce a thing and something goes haywire with the thing, you've got to look at it like, okay, whatever was going on with the thing was not meant to be. So you thank the universe for kiboshing the thing for whatever reason, right? And then you kind of move on. Now, I'm going to redo the interview in question that's already arranged, the conversation. And hopefully it's going to go better tech-wise, and all will be well. And then the timing will be right, and the vibration will be right on that conversation. It'll warm your cockles in a way that maybe the previous conversation wouldn't have. Who's to say? But you can get down in the dumps. You can feel despondent, and I did for a minute. Sometimes when you're like me, and you're inclined towards signs and symbols, you can look at something like that saying, oh man, I'm not supposed to do the podcast at all. I go to extremes. I go to extremes of reaction on things sometimes, typically to the negative. I can be very balanced and guarded about the positive, but when a negative thing happens, or a perceived negative thing, I can fall off a cliff very, very, very quickly. If you were picturing me and my positive-negative bias as the image of, let's say, a cliff, right? Like a Wile E. Coyote Looney Tunes cliff. And a person could be standing at a certain part of the cliff, right? On the flat land. And on one side is positive, and on one side is negative. I got my heels about 6 inches from falling off the negative side of the cliff. That's a thing I need to work on. And one of the ways in which you work on that is to alter your perception of events, right? All you can really control is your perception, So I take a look at an episode that falls apart tech-wise, and instead of falling off the cliff, I say, okay, there's an opportunity here for perhaps a better episode or a more effective or more resonant episode to take its place. And then your feet move maybe 6 inches forward. You begin to put a little bit of distance between yourself and the edge of that cliff. Now, I envy the people who can be kind of in the middle of the plane, P-L-A-I-N, and trending forward. I think people who are standing on the other side with their toes 6 inches from falling off the positivity cliff, this metaphor has become something of a disaster. All I'm saying is, I'm looking at it like, okay, that particular episode wasn't meant to be. We're going to do another one, and it'll be terrific, man. But where it leaves me is in this position of doing the sort of episode I don't really want to do anymore, all right, which is a hodgepodge. When I brought the show back, I brought it back with the intention of doing episodes that are just a little more substantial, okay? Episodes with a bit of heft. Try and get some heft going, you know what I mean? I wanted things to be more topical, less about me, more about stuff, more about things. If you think of the superficial histories that I've done, I want to trend in that kind of direction. So you sit down with an episode and it's about something. To the degree in which I can do it, I want to push the show in that direction. And then here we are, the second episode back, and I'm scrambling together a hodgepodge, but I'm trying to give the people something. Everybody needs a little something, man. So I'm doing my best here to give you something of value, even though I'm as half-assing it as is possible to do, really. I intend to release this episode today. One of the other things you've noticed, hopefully, is that I've moved from a Tuesday release to a Wednesday release. There was a practical reason for that decision, all right? Because I used to record on Mondays. I still record on Mondays. And then I'd have to turn that thing around by Tuesday, and that's a lot of pressure. You got to do all of the editing, got to put the whole thing together, got to do the show notes, got to do the art, got to get it uploaded, got to do the social media. A lot of work, man. So I thought it would make a certain amount of practical sense for me to record on Mondays and release on Wednesdays. Give me a little buffer, And here I am. It's hot Wednesday morning. I'm sitting down here trying to turn this thing around, in the AM. Want to get this out by noon, which I think is going to be a bit of a stretch, but maybe early afternoon. So this is 100% not what I want the new episodes to be, but here we are. And when you find yourself in this position as a podcaster, there's really only one question to ask, and that question is WWRD. What would Rogan do? And I'm going to do what I think Rogan would do, or Marin, or Emma Chamberlain, or Tim Ferriss. All those people at the highest end of the podcast game would do exactly what I'm going to do for you right now, kids. Which is read a poem. I said on the last episode that in lieu of doing a tour blog on the last Sarah tour in the fall, I did not do a tour blog for the first time. I thought I'm going to do a couple of poems here and there, just to feel like I've got some record of the event beyond my memory, and because that might provide some interest to people. So I did a poem. After a day trip, a side trip, a day off, the great Kay Howell and I trundled off to Amsterdam to spend a bit of time. And Amsterdam, man, if you have not been to Amsterdam, make a point once in your life of going to Amsterdam, man. Amsterdam, this kind of ancient, tawdry city full of absolute character and characters. Amsterdam has turned prostitution and marijuana into tourist attractions. That ain't easy to do, man. But once you get past the sort of tawdry veneer of Amsterdam, you start looking at the architecture and the canals, winding their way through the downtown area. Amsterdam is a stunning and magnificent city, man. One of the great cities. Now, I haven't been to all the cities, but I've been to a few, and I've been to some of the major ones, kids, all right? And Amsterdam has a special flavor all of its own. You walk out of the train station, and you just sort of walk out into this magnificence, and you smell the sewer system, and you smell the shawarma place next door, and you smell weed, and you hear this compelling patois of every language imaginable. It is extremely international. There are people there from everywhere, whether they are living there or visiting there, and you hear Dutch and German and English and languages from Africa, and you hear Chinese, and you hear all the languages this wonderful swirl, It's got so much character, Amsterdam. The buildings are beautiful. There's this whole vibe happening there that I've never really felt anyplace else. Amsterdam is an evocative kind of place, and it is so worth a side trip when you've got a day off on the road, man. Kay and I went into Amsterdam. We had a memorable time. I captured that memorable time as poetically as I can. I am by no means a poet, but I like this poem, and I'll tell you why a little bit later. But here we go. This is a poem I wrote on tour last fall. It is called Amsterdam, and it followed a trip to Amsterdam. Amsterdam. Everyone's a poet in an Irish bar. The waiter, the Copenhagen man, the Canadian sailors on shore leave, sharing pints and speaking Rick Mercer's English. You can say something in your own head and laugh like someone else said it to you. Then you wonder how tightly the universe can grip you by the temples and how long it will take to let you go. A Portuguese princess on the river, a smile behind glass. How much is this perception and how much reality? A city can speak to you through a canal, through a shot glass, through a box of masala noodles, or a deck of pornographic playing cards. What it says and what you hear can be different things, both sad and beautiful. Food for thought beyond the croissants you bought for the ride home. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for your kind applause. That was Amsterdam, and I like that poem because it's got Easter eggs in it. I like that poem because it's got references. There's a line in there about a Portuguese princess on the river, and Kay and I, we took a canal cruise. This is a thing in Amsterdam. There are little cruise boats everywhere. You walk down to the canal, you slap down your 20 euros or whatever it is, you get on board. And they give you a drink, and then they take you on a guided tour through the canals, and you're just looking at all these buildings. It's incredible. How did they build these buildings into the water? Maybe I'm getting it backwards, but you've seen pictures of Venice and the river boats going through, and the buildings are in the river. How do they do that? I don't know how they do that, but suddenly you're on the river, and you're looking up at these buildings. It's very, very cool. And there was a tour guide called Angela, and she is from Portugal, and she was very charming and ebullient and knowledgeable, and we had a great time. And she is the Portuguese princess on the river. This is what I'm talking about, and it's funny because she wound up following me and following Kay on Instagram, and then she read the poem, and I'm like, hey, you're the Portuguese princess on the river, and how delightful is that? You know what I mean? So I like these things with Easter eggs, and I'm not here to talk about my poems, because I ain't a poet. You want to listen to a poet? Go back and listen to my episode with Chris Banks, who is actually a professional published poet, and a brilliant one at that, all right? If you're a Generation X person, if you're a Gen Xer like me, man, the forgotten generation, go and read Chris Banks' poetry, because he comes from the same sort of place we do, man. And his poems are full of references. His poems have this unique kind of charm and intimacy. People think, especially if you stopped reading poems after you were done high school and they kind of slammed like Shakespeare down your throat, this kind of thing. And you have this notion that that's what poetry is. Not that Shakespeare isn't brilliant or the collective of artists who became Shakespeare aren't brilliant. But, if you haven't read kind of modern poetry, it ain't necessarily like that, man. So go read somebody like Banks, all right? And you don't have to read me. There's not much to be read. But that poem provides kind of a segue into this notion of Easter eggs in lyrics, all right? And I had that sort of come to my consciousness recently because a week or so ago, a week and a half ago, actually, it's like a week ago exactly today, I went down to T-Dot. For those of you who are not from Ontario, that's a code name for Tirana. Went down to T-Dot and I played the Horseshoe Tavern, the famous infamous, historic Horseshoe Tavern for the first time. And the Horseshoe is one of those venues, man. It is an iconic Canadian music venue. It's been around for like 70 years or something as the Horseshoe. And everybody's played there, man. It's like a rite of passage to play the Horseshoe. And for some reason, in my wide and varied career, I've never had the chance to play the Horseshoe, man. I've seen shows there. You know, I saw the Balconies there on their farewell tour. Broke my freaking heart, but I saw the Balconies at the Horseshoe. And I finally got a chance to play it with Lindsay and the Lonelies, all right? Alt country band that I play in. We released a record in 2018 called Lonely is a Dirty Word. You can find that on the Spotify. Very proud of that record. Lindsay is a terrific songwriter, and I really enjoy that band. And we played the North by Northeast Festival, so we went down to the Horseshoe and played. And what, kids, is the most recognizable, distinguishing feature of the Horseshoe Tavern? Anybody? That's right. It's the checkerboard floors, all right? You walk in, the dance floor is a checkerboard. And where do we know the checkerboard floors from, kids? That Night in Toronto with its checkerboard floors. That is from Bob Cajun by the Tragically Hip. That reference to the floors at the Horseshoe Tavern, you know? And Bob Cajun, incidentally, I've probably said this before on the show. You know that I'm not a giant Hip fan, but dang it, man. Anytime a Hip song comes on the radio, I can sing every freaking line. I've never owned a Tragically Hip CD, but I could sing the whole dang concert. You know what I mean? And there was a point in time, actually, this is a digression. There was a point in time before I started playing music seriously as a drummer, I considered responding to an ad that was looking for someone to be in a Tragically Hip cover band. And I was not going in as the drummer. I was going in as Gord Downey. I had it in my head for a minute to try and be the singer in a Tragically Hip cover band. Not an easy thing to do, and I don't know if I could have pulled it off or not, but I feel like maybe I could have, you know? Anyways, I never went, and I've never been in a Tragically Hip cover band. I have covered the Hip, covered a bunch of Hip songs, because if you are a Canadian act, independent, even if you're out there playing your own music, you are obligated to a certain number of covers at a show, and as a Canadian artist, you kind of have to do the Hip. So I've covered me some Hip, that's fine. My favorite Hip song is Bob Cajun, and Bob Cajun, wonderful song by the way if you've not heard it, references the checkerboard floors at the Horseshoe Tavern. And so I was standing there and I took a photo, and you can see it on the Instagram, of the checkerboard floors. And that got me thinking about these Easter eggs in lyrics. You know what I mean? I'm not a great lyricist. I am a writer. I possess a certain amount of eloquence, but there's more to lyrics than pretty words and eloquence. You know, lyrics that really resonate, lyrics that are about something. And I play with a lot of people, including the person who was supposed to be the guest on this episode, who are just brilliant lyricists. And it's because they have this ability to tap into their experience and present it in a genuine way, in an honest way. And you know, what you find is that your individual experience, no matter how unique you tend to think you are, is kind of universal, man. And so when you hear somebody being honest in their lyrics and eloquent and poetic, you know, those are like the cherries on top. There's a certain resonance in that, and it's really cool, but it requires an enormous amount of self-awareness, reflection, and vulnerability. I've never been very good at that. When I wrote songs for Hearts, they were, for the most part, not entirely, but for the most part, kind of gibberish, you know? And then other people can write stories, and the Hip are great for writing stories. And Bob Cajun kind of presents a story. The Hip does that sort of thing. So I'm standing on the edge of the floor at the Horseshoe before we played, and recognizing the checkerboard floors and recognizing that reference in the Hip song. And then that twigged me to another related reference that I came across recently. Now, this one goes to Sarah Harmer, okay? As you know, I caught 2 Sarah Harmer shows recently, and both were outstanding and emotional and cathartic, and Sarah Harmer is so freaking wonderful. Her new record, I guess it's still new. It came out in 2020, but the world stopped. You know what I mean? Her most recent record is called Are You Gone? And that title is pulled from a song called What I Was to You, all right? Here's the interesting thing. I'm going to read you a lyric, all right, from What I Was to You by Sarah Harmer. It says, back then, you got me on the door. I was too young to get in. Old friend, we'll get you to it now. The show is out of this world and it's about to begin. Great. That's Sarah Harmer talking about something, all right? So you go see her live and she's like, yeah, I'm going to play a song for you now that I wrote for a couple of my friends who have passed away. And it was a couple of people, one of whom was Gord Downie of the Tragically Hip. Whoa, weird connection. So she wrote this song for Gord Downie. And then, as she was playing the song in L-Town, she says, back then, you got me on the door. Actually, it was Call the Office. Whoa! And then the place goes nuts, right? Because Call the Office, much like the Horseshoe Tavern, I have to say, was an iconic venue in Canada, man. Call the Office was on the circuit. If you were a club band and you were on the road and you came to L-Town, you played freaking Call the Office, man. It was a dive bar of dive bars, a dive venue, horrendous bathrooms. I remember Dennis Miller once talking about being in the bathroom of a porno theater. Do those still exist? Is that exclusively a New York City thing? Actually, Amsterdam, now that I think about it. Dennis Miller said, you go into the bathroom at a porno theater, and it's like a soccer match. Nobody wants to touch anything with their hands. Bathrooms that Call the Office were something like that. But when you are an up-and-comer, when you are in the scene in L-Town, playing Call the Office is also a rite of passage, man. And I had the opportunity to do that many, many, many times with many, many, many acts, and it was always such a great room to play. You know, and at a CTO, you look around, and one of the distinguishing features of that place is that there would be band photos on the wall, press photos, right? Back in the day, your band had like a package, and it had a cassette in it, or eventually a CD, and, you know, a bio and press photos. This whole package was presented to the venue as part of trying to book the gig. And so what you get at Call the Office was just lines, rows all over the walls of band photos behind glass, man. And when you start to look at it, you're like, what? Because it's Big Sugar, and it's Blink-182, and it's Radiohead. You know, all these bands that were on the way up stopped in at Call the Office and played. And I saw Face to Face there, and I saw the Weaker Thans there, and I saw Cotton M. Griner show, Tokyo Police. I saw a lot of shows at Call the Office, and then eventually got to play a lot of shows at Call the Office, which is cool. And then you hear Sarah Harmer say, back then you got me on the door, I was too young to get in. And she was trying to get into Call the Office of all freaking places. I appeared, incidentally, several years ago, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 years ago, 5 years ago, in a documentary about a couple of famous L-Town venues, the Richmond and Call the Office. And they brought in folks from the local scene to sit down and just give their impressions and memories of those places. You know, I've been lucky enough to play both. And so I sat down and I just talked a little bit about the sort of rarefied air, if you could stand it at times, of Call the Office, you know. And I wore, during my segments, my King's X Gretchen Goes to Nebraska t-shirt. Always got to represent, man. And I think that is out there on YouTube someplace. I don't know. I don't have a great starring role in it, anything like that. But I happen to be in it. And just interesting to hear Sarah Harmer reference Call the Office in this song that's about Gord Downie, who wrote the song about the checkerboard floors at the Horseshoe. And isn't it interesting how it all weaves together, you know? Call the Office, sadly, is gone now. A casualty of the pandemic, of which there are many. Here in L-Town, we lost, I want to say 5 rooms. I want to say 5 venues went down. And that hurts, man. That hurts a scene where independent bands are trying to find places to play. You know, if you're Queens of the Stone Age or, you know, somebody at that level, you're always going to have the local arena to play. All right, we got a 10,000 seater for you. And even if you are touring at the 1 to 2,000 level, we got the London Music Hall. You know, you can come play that. But if you're an indie like me and you're playing in bands that are playing smaller rooms than that, it hurts to see them go down. It seems like craft breweries are filling in the gap. That seems to be what's happening now. Come and play the craft brewery, and that's cool, and God bless those venues. Incidentally, if you're in L-Town on Friday night, Freitag, come on down to Union 10 Distillery, where I will be performing behind the great Kay Howell and the great Carly Thomas. And that is an event sponsored by, and I suppose in support of, the London Lesbian Film Festival. Good cause. Come on down to Union 10, enjoy what will be a fabulous night of live rock and or roll music with a bit of folk and a bit of funk and a bit of soul, man. Come on down and check that out. But we're running out of rooms to play, and that's a difficult thing. Call the Office went down. Several other of the traditional venues in this town went down, as did others in every other freaking city. It's tough, man. You know, when we talk about the music industry being gutted by the pandemic, we're not just talking about the bands that went and couldn't play anymore. We're talking about, you know, at the higher level, we're talking about the crew that went with those bands, the sound people, the roadies, the lighting people, you know, we're talking about the tour managers. We're talking about people in venues who run sound, wait staff, bookers. We're talking about bus drivers. You know, we're talking about a lot of people. And then the venues themselves. This is an industry that was gutted, man. And it's trying to find its legs again. And if you're out there, go to shows, all right? Go and tip your wait staff. Go and support venues. Go and support bands, because the industry needs you, my friends. Buy your indie band's CD or go to Bandcamp and download it. Support these bands, okay? Because they have taken a freaking pounding, and I've been part of that pounding, and I've watched it and I've experienced it, and it sucks. The good thing is, live music is coming back and recorded music is still happening, man. And I'm going to point you right now to some new music you ought to check out, kids, okay? Now, I mentioned when I sat down in that Call the Office documentary, I wore my King's X t-shirt, and that is a segue. This is a whole series of segues. That was a segue into the new solo record by the great Tabor, all right? Now, you know, if you've been listening to my show for a long time, that I am a giant King's X fan, and I am a giant Tabor fan, all right? He is the guitar player, sometime lead singer, co-writer of the band King's X. And if you're not listening to King's X by now, I want you to get off my show. Go listen to King's X. Ty is my favorite musician on planet Earth. Some people are just mesmerizing to watch. Now, Ty is, he is described by people as an extraordinarily underrated guitar player, and he is. Ty has a tone and a style and a vibe that is all his own, you know? Dude can rip when he wants to, but the thing about his playing is that it's just so tasty, you know? Ty doesn't do a lot of the pyrotechnic stuff. He lets it loose once in a while, all right? He's got it in his locker, but he's very judicious about that. And I go to a King's X gig, and you would think I stand in front of Jerry Gaskell playing the drums, and believe me, I get an angle on him, all right? There's stuff I want to see. But I stand in front of Tabor, and I am just mesmerized watching Ty play, you know? And he has released, over the past 20 years, 25 years, a whole slew a veritable slew of solo records. And his most recent one is called Shades. And I want you to go and check it out, man. The thing about Ty's solo records is that they are in many ways different from King's X records. King's X records are tend to be heavier and funkier, and they've got a lot of Doug Pinnick's writing in them, and they got a lot of Doug Pinnick's voice in them. And what you get with a lot of Ty solo records is more just straight up rock and roll albums, you know? They kind of harken back almost to kind of a 70s vibe with modern sounds. Maybe I'm just talking out my A there, but straight up rock and roll records, all right? Now, if you want to go listen to something that's off the radar and shouldn't be, go listen to Ty Tabor's solo records, all right? My favorite Ty solo records are Rock Garden and Something's Coming. And what you get from those is just straight up rock and roll albums. Ty is a great writer of riffs. Ty is a brilliant guitar player, so if you're into leads, you get a lot of that. Not like Joe Satriani style or Steve Vai style, where it's 8 minutes of just stuff that makes your head pop off your freaking shoulders. I saw Steve Vai live on his last tour, and you leave a show like that going, what just happened? Like, what just happened? It's like when I saw Zakk Wylde. Zakk Wylde came and did his acoustic thing. I've talked about this before. But he would shred so hard on an acoustic guitar, it was like you'd been jackhammered for 2 hours. It was amazing. Ty's not like that, but you get some real tasty guitar playing, man. You get some really tasty leads. And as he's continued to do these solo records, his writing has become more kind of eclectic and strange. So you're not just getting a thin, kind of pencil-thin rock album that you listen to and then dispose of. There's a lot of depth happening. So if you're there for just the rock and roll, I'm going to recommend you listen to the first song, Come Home. It's just a banger. I'm going to recommend you listen to Shallow. I'm going to recommend you listen to What You're Thinking. What You're Thinking is maybe my favorite song on the record. It's got kind of I would say a Goo Goo Dolls kind of vibe. It's just got a happy riff. And it's a riff you groove to, man. I have talked before about songs whereby you hear them and you must move. What You're Thinking is a must-move song by Ty Tabor, man. But it's not just that. All right? It's sad. You know, there's a tune called Best Day in a While, which Ty wrote about one of his parents who passed away. I don't want to give it away, you know, no spoilers here. But it's just a sad and evocative song, you know, hits you in the feels, man. There's a tune called One Drop of Water that's also just sad. These are all emotionally evocative songs, and the songs that work, kids, are the songs that evoke emotions. Doesn't have to be sad emotions, can be. Songs that make you happy, songs that make you angry. So sometimes you get a song like Best Day in a While, and it's sad, but it invokes an emotion in you, and that feels really good. That is a release. Or What You're Thinking just makes you bounce and makes you happy. And then there's weird songs. Weird, moody tunes. Sister Genocide and Doesn't Linger. These are like headphones tunes. These are not radio singles, okay? These are introspective, musically deep, angular, somewhat obtuse, moody, strange songs, but really great, you know? There's a depth of writing happening here, which is the product of just years, decades of writing. And it's the work of a person who has found and become comfortable with the way he does things. But there's always, you know, edges he's pushing. There are always angles he's trying, you know? And I think that's cool about Ty, because you're a person who could rest on your laurels, all right? King's X released their first album in 1988, but they were a band, you know, 5 or more years before that. Dude has been writing songs for 40 years, and he's written some that, you know, a small but faithful group of fans find to be their favorite songs of all time. Dude could rest on that, or dude could retread the formula. You know, a lot of bands do that. A lot of artists do that. And the life goes out of the music. And you can feel it, man. I like Ty pushing new envelopes. He did a couple records, maybe 3 records, with Wally Farkas, ex of Galactic Cowboys, and they were called Xenophobe. And these are just like ambient noise records. And he had another thing called Trip Magnet, which had a lot of like electronic vibe in it. And so we got this cat who could sit back very comfortably cranking out rock and roll tunes, really pushing boundaries and experimenting with things. And I dig that. That is instructive, people. You have to keep pushing envelopes. Otherwise, dude, you get old. That's important. That is important. And I dig Ty for doing that. So go listen to Ty's new record, Shades. Listen to Rock Garden. Listen to Something's Coming. If you want a full record and then like a sampler of some of the other records, pre-Shades, the album before that was called Alien Beans, and it was a full-length new record and then a second companion of kind of hits from the previous stuff. So if you want a sampling, sit down for an afternoon with the Alien Beans record. But check out Shades. I will put, one of those tunes on the John Huff podcast, referenced on the podcast 2022 playlist. You can find it there. And you can also find there the new single by Jacquie Neville. We love Jacquie, all right? We love Jacquie. Episode number 47, Jacquie Neville of the Balconies. Throwback to the Horseshoe Tavern, kids. Jacquie, who has released a couple of singles since the Balconies broke up. She's utterly changed her life, but the music never went away. Go listen to episode number 47. I'm so pleased with that conversation with Jacquie. Jacquie's got some cool stuff going on, and she recently released a brand new single called St. Andrew's Place, and I'm so tickled by this song. Jacquie is the last rock star, man. I've talked about this before. I don't need to talk about it again. There's a moment on her new single, St. Andrew's Place, at the end of the second verse, the last line of lyrics in the second verse, where she does the Jacquie Neville thing, where she does the last rock star thing. The first time I saw Jacquie, the Balconies were playing on the same festival that my band, Hiroshima Hearts, was playing, and I'd never heard of them before, and I heard this screeching wail happening. And I went around to the front of stage to see what on earth. And there was Jacquie in all of her rock star glory. Big Gibson guitar, ripped jeans, boots, feather in her hair. The last rock star. And she gives you just a little tease. Hey, man, I still got it. The end of the second verse of St. Andrew's Place. It's a wonderful song. It's just a straight up banging rock and roll song. Got maybe like a late 90s kind of vibe. I don't know if that's even true. It's a rock song. It's Jacquie. Jacquie is wonderful. I can tell you, Jacquie and I have been in conversation recently, and there's some possibility down the line when some stuff comes to fruition of her making a repeat appearance on the show. So let's cross our fingers for that. Go listen to St. Andrew's Place. It's the new single by Jacquie Neville. I freaking love Jacquie's music. Love Jacquie's voice. She is a wonderful performer, and I hope that some of this new music will also result in some shows, because I would like to see Jacquie play again. Super duper cool. Go listen to that interview. Man, it is powerful because it talks about, when bands end and a life that you were living ends with them. And what do you do now? What is the process of moving through what is a grief and what is an utter transformation of your life? How do you do that in a positive way? And if you're a young musician out there and you have aspirations of reaching a kind of level like the Balconies did, or even beyond that, making records, touring, you need some perspective on what happens when the music ends, man, because it likely will. All right. There are a few bands out there that managed to keep it going. The Rolling Stones, and now we're watching people like Motley Crue, etc. on the big stadium tour. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Who are pushing that age envelope and still trying to keep the things going. But for the most part, 99% of the bands that reach a level are going to end. And you gotta be ready for that, man, because you have an identity in a band like that. And when the band goes, the identity goes. And who are you when that happens? And what do you do to pick up the pieces? And how do you use that in a positive, productive, transformative, constructive kind of way, right? That's a lot of what Jacquie and I talked about on episode number 47. So if you want a glimpse, if you want to look at the inside of what's in store, go listen to that and prepare yourself. It doesn't mean you have to be negative. It doesn't mean you have to look for the end. It doesn't even mean the end has to be a bad thing, right? That can be turned into something very, very positive. And a lot of times when the band ends, it kind of needs to, man, for your mental health, for your peace of mind, for your finances. And sometimes a project is just done, you know? Go listen to Jacquie's episode number 47. It's really, really terrific. I hope to have her on the show again. Definitely go listen to St. Andrews Plays, a great new tune by her. Lovely to hear her rocking out again and doing the Jacquie Neville thing. All right, let's talk about it. I did the whole last episode about the stadium tour. It's on now. You know, they've done a few shows. I haven't seen a whole lot of footage, but the consensus and the scuttlebutt seem to be that so far, Poison is winning. Dude, Poison is winning. Again, I haven't seen enough footage to give a complete, really, really well-informed opinion on this. But Poison is crushing it. Okay, I've watched enough Poison to know. A ton of energy. CC DeVille is playing like a man possessed, and I don't know if it's a wig or not, but that hair's working. The band is sounding great. They are playing great. There's a ton of energy happening. They're playing like kids. Poison's always been that, by the way. You know, whether you like Poison's music, whether you respect the whole glam thing, Poison's always been a super duper high energy show, man. And they are crushing it on this tour. It's a little bit disappointing, and I wonder how it feels for them that, you know, they're second on a bill of four. Every night they're playing and it ain't dark out. And this is a band that in their heyday was headlining rooms like that, like stadiums, you know? Is it weird for them to now be, you know, second on the bill, playing in the daylight? Or have they reached a level of maturity where it doesn't matter, man? We're here for nothing but a good time. We're going out and we're getting it over with early and we're crushing it every night. And then we're having a good time after that, you know? But from what I've seen, Poison is winning so far. And there's a certain leg up, I guess, that Poison has. And one of the things is, you know, what everybody is watching to see with all of these shows, with the elder statesmen now of rock and roll, is can the singer still sing? And in repeated instances, we're finding that they kind of can't. Not like they used to, and that's okay. We're talking about 60, 65-year-old people. Again, it's why we don't see all that many 60-year-olds in the NFL, all right? Stuff breaks down physically. Very, very, very tough to maintain for those bands from the 80s for whom vocal pyrotechnics was such a big part of the show, right? Maybe not so much in the case of the bands on this tour, Def Leppard being the exception. If you go back and listen to the Def Leppard records from the 80s, Joe Elliott is stretching there, man. And that dude was really, really good. Dude was really, really a great rock singer. And, you know, he's still doing a lot of it. I think they've drop-tuned some of it. Perfectly understandable, and that's totally fine. And Joe's sounding okay. But the thing about Poison, and this is where they get the leg up, is that the vocal pyrotechnics was never really part of the sound. You know, Bret Michaels didn't hit high notes. Bret Michaels didn't screech and wail. You know, Bret Michaels wasn't doing what Sebastian Bach was doing or whoever, you know. That was not their vibe. That was not his style of singing. And so when you advance 40 years, 35 years, Bret Michaels' voice is the same because it was always lower. The band never depended on Bret to hit the high notes. There weren't any. That becomes an advantage down the line, you know? And it's very cool. And so Poison sounds like Poison. They don't look the same, but they look modern. You know, they look like a rock band. That's cool. It's not like they're walking out in the flannel. And they're playing with great energy. They sound great. Like, no one's ever worried about how it's going to sound. It's always a question of the singer. The music sounds better than it ever did because the technology is better than it ever was. So they're wailing, and I think Poison's winning. I haven't seen a lot of Joan Jett, but she's Joan Jett. And she's an icon, and God love her. But you know, everybody's doing okay. Even Vince is doing okay from what I've seen. The person who's struggling is poor Tommy Lee, and I cannot imagine having to play drums with 4 broken ribs, man. I've never had a broken rib. I have a friend who has a cracked rib right now, and it's like he's taking time off work for 1 cracked rib. It's that painful. 4 broken ones, and Tommy's out there trying to play. And if you ever watched Tommy Lee, dude sits pretty low. Like, he's a tall, lanky cat. But he sits low, and he sits kind of hunched over. So he's like, his whole upper body is resting on those ribs. And if it hurts to breathe, and it hurts to even move with broken ribs, try flailing your arms around and being all kind of tucked over like that. It must be freaking excruciating. So what does Tommy do? You know, if you're at a certain level, you can hire a backup guy. It's like when the hockey players come on and they got 2 or 3 sticks. You know what I mean? Tommy boy, he's got 2 or 3 drummers. And the fill-in guy is Tommy Clufetus, who is a beast. Clufetus, who played with Black Sabbath, played with Ozzy, played with Rob Zombie. This dude is an A-list call guy. He's a first call guy. And it just goes to show you again, man, that opportunity freaking knocks, you know? You're Tommy Clufetus. I don't know if he was playing with anybody right now. He's probably, you know, pandemic. The career ends if you're a side player, man. If you're a side player and you're not getting royalties off of any music or anything like that, pandemic comes, touring industry shuts down, and I don't know what Tommy Clufetus was up to. Maybe he was in the studio doing some stuff. I don't know. But he might have been looking around saying, I'm Tommy Clufetus, for crying out loud. I played with Black Sabbath. I toured with Ozzy. Somebody going to call me? And somebody did. And I bet you he didn't know when the stadium tour was announced that he was going to wind up being the sub guy, the backup goalie for Tommy Lee, and going to be out there playing most of the show, most of the nights. So opportunity knocks, kids. You know, you got to hold on. You got to keep the faith just a little bit. And sometimes opportunity just knocks. Real quick, I'm amazed. We got an episode here. We got an episode, kids. We're riding it in. We're coming in for a landing. There's a documentary you should go and watch. It's called Count Me In. This is a documentary all about the life and times of drummers, man. The real reality of being a drummer in today's music world. And it's got folks like Stuart Copeland and Chad Smith and Cindy Blackman and Nico McBrain and Taylor Hawkins, R.I.P., and Abe Laboriel Jr., who plays with Paul McCartney. And our old friend, Emily Dolan Davis, is a featured part of that documentary, Count Me In. Emily, who also proved that opportunity knocks. Good things happen when you put yourself out there. Emily became Emily when she put up a video on YouTube, you can still see it, of her covering the Foo Fighters, right? If you don't know, Emily was a guest on this show early on. So go back to the teens and you'll find my interview with Emily Dolan Davis, who is just a magnificent human being, a formidable human being, and an absolute freaking sweetheart, and a terrific drummer. Tours with Kim Wilde, among others. She is the drummer on The Voice Kids UK TV show. She's dynamite, and she's terrific, and she's a wealth of wisdom. And she got her big break at her sister's insistence when she put up a video of her covering a Foo Fighters song wrapped in pixie lights. And after that, I mean, it went sort of viral, right? This girl playing and crushing this tune. Then she gets a call from the darkness. Do you want to come and record with us? Yes, I do. So opportunity knocks, and Emily is in the Count Me In video. She talks about that. Great documentary. Somebody else who's in that documentary that's an interesting story is Samantha Maloney. And she ties, again, the threads all tie together, kids. Samantha Maloney was the female drummer who was playing with Motley Crue. Remember when that happened? Tommy Lee left. And then somebody else was playing with them, and I can't remember who. And then the space became available. We need a drummer. And Motley Crue went out and hired a girl called Samantha Maloney, who had been in Hole, and she'd been in Shift. She'd been in a bunch of bands. She was on the scene. Samantha Maloney gets hired, and she tours with Motley Crue. I remember somebody saying, some other girl drummer out there. I don't like to speak of drummers in terms of girl drummer or whatever like that, but it's important. It was a female person who said, a female identifying person, who said that she couldn't wait to hear Samantha Maloney play Girls, Girls, Girls with Motley Crue. And I thought that was terrific. And she's a beast of a drummer. She's terrific. And her trajectory is really fun to watch. Now, she was a teenager, Samantha Maloney, and a dynamite drummer and a dynamite basketball player. And so she was in this band called Shift. They were indie. They were doing their thing. And she reached this fork in the road, man. Go left on a basketball scholarship and pursue basketball and go to college, yada, yada, yada. Go right, stay in Shift, try to make it in the music scene. And she went right, man. That is not the popular choice. That is not what your high school guidance counselor would tell you to do, man. You ever wonder if your high school guidance counselor took the road more traveled and wound up a high school guidance counselor and never wanted to? Just a thought, man. Samantha Maloney went right. She stayed in Shift, and then that did its thing. And then she got a call from Courtney Love to play in Hole. And then she got the call to play with Motley Crue and did that for a while. And then she got the call to play with the Eagles of Death Metal, and then Peaches, and then this project she did with Billy Ray Cyrus. And now Samantha Maloney, this is a weird convergence. Now Samantha Maloney plays with a Toronto-based band called the Suffragettes, which is an all-female band that plays like surf music, right? And I've been following the Suffragettes for years. I didn't even realize Samantha was the drummer. And last fall, my pal Kay and Sarah Smith did the Melissa Etheridge cruise. And one of the featured acts on that cruise was the Suffragettes. And so I have this weird degree of separation from Samantha Maloney, who is the drummer in the Suffragettes and was a drummer in Motley Crue. And what an interesting career all of that is, you know? Ain't it a funny world? Ain't it a funny world when you can choose music over basketball and then wind up in Motley Crue and the Suffragettes? And ain't it a weird world when the gods of technology kibosh the interview you did, and you have to sit down and do a scramble, and somehow you get a full-length episode out of it? Want to thank everybody for the feedback on the last episode. I appreciate everybody. There's a lot of Motley Crue fans out there. I didn't even realize. That's pretty cool. I want to thank everybody who said welcome back. I want to thank people for hanging in. I'm going to shutting up. You can find me on the Instagram, JW_Huff. You can find the John Huff Podcast Facebook page, not surprisingly, on Facebook. Can ask you again, folks, please do give me a rating and review. It so much warms my cockles and so much helps the show get found. And the more the show can get found, the more I have an audience. Maybe I can use that and, you know, be able to dedicate a little more time to what I'm doing. Please leave a rating and review on your preferred podcast platform. I do appreciate it. I do appreciate you listening. Have yourself a wonderful week. If all goes well, I will be back next week with a dynamite guest and then some episodes with heft. And then we'll just see how it goes. But until then, good things happen when you put yourself out there, and I'll check you later. Yeah. That night in Toronto, with its checkerboard floors, ride it on horseback and keep it order restored till the man they couldn't hang stepped to the mic and sang, and their voices rang with that Aryan twang. Oh, I almost had it.